I really didn't understand your question on our ambassador in Syria. Was it a question or a comment?
It's a question. Where the Lebanese pro-democracy and pro-freedom majority think that the approach, the American approach, is tactic more than strategy toward Syria, especially that in the last 2 years, nothing really has been achieved. I mean, no improvement with the Syrian regime.
Well, I'm an advocate of, again, connecting the dots. Lebanon's independence and evolution as an independent country cannot be achieved without bringing the Syrian equation into play. When I was ambassador to Syria in the 1990s, American policy was very instrumental in ending the civil war in Lebanon with our other Arab allies. We were able to maintain our principled position on Lebanon, that no matter what the United States would do in terms of its relations with Syria, but also more importantly in terms of Israeli-Syrian peacemaking, it would not be done at the expense of Lebanon's political independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. In fact, when I was Assistant Secretary of State for the Middle East in a transition from Bush 41 to Bill Clinton, the first meeting we had with then Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri that President Bill Clinton had, President Clinton asked me, he said, what is the most important message I should convey to the Prime Minister of Lebanon? And I told him exactly that. I said, Mr. President, that whatever we do on the Israeli-Syrian peace track will not be at the expense of our commitment to Lebanon's political independence, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. So my view is that we have to be totally represented in these capitals. We should be having a dialogue with Syria. An American dialogue with Syria would be very important in terms of what happens in Lebanon also, to say nothing about the Israeli-Syrian relationship.
What I'd like to do, since we have three questioners left, oops, over there just multiplied. There, whoops. Okay, I was going to sort of say, have everybody ask their questions and let every speaker have a final comment, but unfortunately the numbers. So why don't we take one more speaker from each ask your question, and then I'm going to let every member on the panel kind of both wrap up your questions and make some final comments. So the two of you.
All right. My question is for Ms. Maloney. Do you think that we should utilize Turkey in an attempt to help negotiate a solution with Iran? They seem to have positive relations with both the United States and Iran.
Okay, and your question, and then we will let the panelists have their last comment.
My question is very, very clear and straightforward. Well, concerning the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation, peace negotiation, well, wouldn't a Jewish state, the concept of a Jewish state, undermine these peace talks? And wouldn't it be considered as a new ethnic cleansing, considering the Palestinian who has Israeli citizenship inside Israel? What will happen for these Palestinians when we declare a Jewish state where the Israeli citizenship is only for Jewish people? Thank you.
Okay, and then I think let each of the panelists both address these questions and any other final thoughts that you may have on where U.S. policy ought to be going on these issues. And then we're going to wrap it up.
Right.
We'll just go straight down the line, the same way we did.
Okay, I guess I'll take the Jewish state question. Look, if you look at the statements of the United States, statements of European leaders, Britain, France, Germany, even Russia, have all said the idea of a Jewish state is something that it's supported by all these countries. And that was the whole idea of the UN partition plan. I think it was mentioned there 30 times. But the way to say it is to do it in a way that makes clear that it's with equal rights for all its citizens. And that's something even Netanyahu has said at the Knesset too, just 2 weeks ago. And the other caveat would be that it does not prejudice any final status issues, meaning the refugee question, which is a legitimate topic for negotiation. So you could say you support the nation state of the Jewish people, with equal rights for all its citizens and without prejudice to any final status issue. And that's part of America's commitment to the moral legitimacy of both a secure Israel and a just Palestine. And I think that would work for all sides. So I think this is an issue that can be finessed. When you talk to Palestinians privately, they see it as a bargaining chip. They feel the Israelis have more chips than they do, and their view is we'll play that card at the appropriate time. And I think I hope there's a way to deal with that in a package approach, so each side feels that they get something.
Yes?
Yeah, I will take the first question and pretend you said Turkey's role vis-a-vis Iraq rather than Iran, leaving the Iran question for Suzanne. Turkey has been playing a very interesting role in the last few years as an emerging economic power in the region, developing free trade zones and very strong strategic relations with a number of countries in the region, including Syria and Iraq. There is some pushback from fears of sort of neo-Ottomanism, but by and large, Turkey's economic power also allows it to play a diplomatic role, which it very much would like to play. And that role is potentially could be very constructive. Again, I'll leave Iran aside for now. But in Iraq, for sure, where Turkey has opened consulates in Basra and in Mosul and also in Erbil, and has developed close relationships both with the Iraqi government and with the Kurdish regional government, it could play a very important mediating role between the two sides, between the central government and the Kurdish regional government, exactly on that fault line I mentioned earlier, the Kurdish-Arab one. Turkish nationalism is the third nationalism coming in there after the Kurdish and the Arab one, and the Persians still on the sidelines of that. But because the Turkmens are such a small community, Turkey cannot really represent that community. It has to have wider interests, and it does, and it also has significant energy interests in Iraq. All of this makes for a very interesting combination, and I think we need to look very closely what Turkey will be doing in the coming years, and I suspect it will be a fairly constructive role that will benefit the unity of Iraq.
I'll speak quickly to the Turkey question and then maybe make one final wrap-up point. In terms of Turkey, I think yes, a simply answered yes, we should try to use them as a potential mediator in dealing with the Iranian nuclear issue, because clearly the Iranians have sought them out and invested some energy in the relationship and appear to trust them, and frankly, because the one time where we've negotiated an enduring solution to a really tough issue, the Algiers Accord, which concluded the hostage crisis, we relied on a third-party interlocutor to help both sides interpret the other, because we just didn't understand the dynamics of the Iranian negotiators or the Iranian political situation, and I think that's it was equally true on the other side, and those factors are present today. I'd say it's not terribly likely in the short term that the Turks are going to emerge in a prominent role on the Iranian issue, simply because the administration really felt very, very badly served, not just by the Tehran declaration, the Turkish-Brazilian attempt to mediate last spring, but also by the Turkish decision to cast a no vote at the Security Council on sanctions. That left a great deal of bitterness that has played out somewhat in public, but I suspect remains in private. One final wrap-up comment just on the domestic political environment here, which I didn't address when it came up in the question. I do think, as I said in my talk, that there is at least a prospect on the horizon of a modest agreement with the Iranians, some version of the TRR that has been being bandied about for the past year. The danger in this political environment is that it will be immediately attacked by the Republicans as a non-answer to a very urgent problem, something that we all know it to be. But if indeed such an agreement can be concluded, if we can come to some agreement with the Iranians, to have a confidence-building measure, even one that's imperfect, even one that doesn't begin to deal with the crux of the issue, on the nuclear issue, to see a concession from the Iranians on the nuclear issue, I think at this moment it would be such an important achievement that we have to do our best to insulate it from the domestic political fray here in the U.S.
Last word.
Well, very briefly, my hope is that President Obama, as he now goes into this phase of his presidency, will use the power of the presidency and the White House and the bully pulpit to really try to obtain bipartisan support, given the elections we've just had in this country, on some of the key foreign policy challenges we face, be it with China, Russia, and what we've been discussing in the Middle East, especially on the Arab-Israeli conflict, how we deal with Iran, the endgame in Iraq, how we deal with Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. To me, these are issues that should obtain bipartisan support. What I worry about is that if the more hardened views come to play and we begin to shoot ourselves in our collective feet in not being able to use all the tools of our diplomacy and all of our power to be able to pursue our national security interests that are so challenging, as we've discussed briefly on this panel. And again, just one minor example, but not naming American ambassadors in critical posts, we're shooting ourselves in the feet. An American ambassador in a tough spot is not a political concession to your enemy.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, panel. Thank you.